Hello everyone, DonTheCrown here, and with an update to the Cold Monk build. Yes, we've gotten a little bit of nerfed. Our comments are not as good as they once were. However, I think that the build is still very, very strong. We just put up a video guide here of us doing one of these strongholds in the tier 16 +3 boss levels. Thanks to this here, you get +1 level basically per difficulty here. And yeah, I think that that's pretty okay, clearing the Citadel with that. Without really having very many problems. And the build just pretty much like performs like it has the entire time. But the big difference here is we're just kind of changing to be a little bit more bell focused, because the bell by itself does quite a bit of damage and just hurts quite badly. And we're using a combination here where we can actually charge up our bell, and while it is on the ground here, so we can have the bell active a lot. And I think that that is just really, really quite powerful, and it's from overabundance. Now, what we've changed the meteor out for is just the ability to ring our bell a lot. So we can drop the bell and cast out Eye of Winter, and as you can see, the Tempest Bell explodes very, very quickly. This thing has a limit of getting hit 18 times right now before it explodes, and each of those hits shoots out about a 10,000 damage shockwave, and we can actually get this hits up to like another 6 here if I put quality on there. And so that is quite a bit of damage there, just very, very quickly. And since we can charge up the bell again pretty fast, this is very, very good for killing bosses and other stuff. And since like bosses getting frozen gives us a lot of power, we're able to shoot out a ton of Eye of Winters very, very quickly. We're also using impetus here to give us even more energy. And we are actually using some cheese here. And the Eye of Winter doesn't even need to be really high level. You can keep this at level 13, which is the minimum level that you can get Eye of Winter. And it doesn't matter because we're not really using it for the damage. We're just using it to trigger our bell and inflict critical weakness, which, you know, gives us, I think like 2% additive flat critical strike chance, which is a pretty big deal for the build. And so just really popping off of them. I'm considering possibly going to a cast on crit setup specifically for bosses, but I really do like that this allows us to very much like pick our moments. We pop elemental invocation. Right now for the main skills, we're using martial tempo, ice bite, primal armament, and cold infusion. And then the last one is probably going to be crescendo. And the reason we're not using close combat with ice strike, even though this does give us 25% more damage, is because close combat has that nasty 40% multiplier to the cost, which I think is pretty not good. And so we can pretty much just like run around ice striking enemies. I know there's like a shattering palm and other stuff you can use as well if you're really interested in that, but I just really haven't been using that. For the most part, I pretty much only use Hand of Chayula here as a like hand strike thing against bosses, or maybe against like a really gnarly rare. And this just allows me to apply hypothermia and freezing mark. Now, one of my number one questions that I get is why can't I put heightened curse into this? And the reason is you need to put hypothermia into the slot first before you can put any supports that would support a curse. The curse needs to be in first. And this is very different than a this is very different than a normal supports from like PoE1. Now, you know, we have like Wave of Frost here is very good for shooting out a huge freeze area. I'm kind of considering dropping this. This is like mostly useful for me if I like, there's a huge pack of ranged mobs that I want to freeze. I'm very scared of. Ranged mobs are pretty scary, but yeah. We're doing Wind Dancer right now. This is going to give us a massive amount of evasion. This is actually the only skill gem that I've qualityed up to this point. This makes it so that each stage gives us 18% more evasion. So getting another 18% more evasion is pretty big. But when you do get hit by a melee attack, this goes away. And it does do a decent amount of damage when it actually shockwaves out with this Gale Force. It does about, what is that, 3,000 damage. And so I have blind on there to blind enemies and maim. So if you get hit by a boss, you're going to blind them for a short time. I'm testing out Unbreakable to see if this actually helps. It doesn't really seem to, but it might. And so we'll have to get back to you on that. Ghost Dance and Herald of Ice are our last auras here with Grim Feast. And so Grim Feast, what this does is when we kill enemies, they have a 50% chance to drop a Remnant, which gives us 95 energy shield, which kind of helps us keep our energy shield up. But this also can overflow our energy shield. So we can go up to 800 energy shield as opposed to like 400 here. Ghost Dance makes it so that when we do get hit, we get 5% of our evasion as energy shield, which is pretty nice. Fast Forward makes this build up shards even quicker. You could potentially even put this back on Wind Dancer if you really wanted, if you want to keep Wind Dancer up all over the time. Cannibalism, Vitality, both really good kind of supports here. If I had more Spirit, I would probably put in Clarity and some other things. Herald of Ice is pretty good. It does give us nice explosion. And we're putting Life and Mana Bounty on this, just because if it happens to kill enemies, we're going to get more life flash charges, but these aren't really stinking important here. And so, yeah, that's pretty much the basics for the build there. Oh, I didn't put this back in. And let's talk a little bit about why we're doing so much evasion. So evasion rating is pretty cool because this allows us to dodge enemy attacks. But the problem is that this doesn't dodge some things, but we get around that with acrobatics. So now we can evade all hits. So things like damage over time and things that aren't technically hits, like secondary damage, I don't believe you can evade, but acrobatics is going to give us less evasion as well. So that's right. I have 68% chance to evade while also having 70% less evasion rating. So we're stacking up evasion a lot here. And then eventually we're also going to take in Protect Me from Harm whenever they fix the Ascendancy stuff. This is going to give us another 40% less evasion. But this makes it so that our physical damage reduction from armor is based on my combined armor and evasion rating. And so this is going to massively boost our physical damage reduction, which is right now 0. And so ideally we're going to get full res capped, chaos res capped, and get back up to like 68, 70% evasion with some really kick butt gear. And so, yeah, it'd be really nice. Now our chest armor is really insane in terms of value that we get from it, because this one here has 1700 evasion. Ideally, I think you can get a chest armor that has all evasion prefixes and get above like 2000 plus evasion rating. And then you can slam the evasion and armor runes in there. And then we're going to be taking Special Reward, which makes it so we get +1 to maximum energy shield per 12 evasion rating on equipped body armor. So we're getting maximum energy shield. We're getting an additional 100% evasion rating from it, which is pretty much, I think it just adds flat evasion. And if I take off the chest armor, you can see how much evasion rating we lose. And now my auras are all popped off. So we went down to 52%, which is what we're at without Wind Dance. And then on top of that, we're getting, for every 15 evasion rating, 1 spirit. So this is giving me 116 spirit for just this body armor. Once we get a better one, we're gonna have even more spirit. So we're kind of like scaling evasion, we're scaling our spirit, we're scaling our energy shield, all from one piece, which is pretty good. Go out and find that type of stuff. Now, we also have this over here, Subterfuge Mask, which we're not going to go get because I don't think that this is as good as the other option. And also, this is very far away from us right now. For the tree, we're pretty much just taking crit all over the place. We're taking elemental damage, all this kind of stuff. We kind of have skipped out a little bit on some of these side nodes for now. I'll probably put these points back in as I've just been like very heavily investing in defenses. My stats have been kind of scuffed. We need a lot of dexterity right now. Might even have too much dexterity now, but having to take things like proficiency does kind of feel bad. So perfect world, I would be able to cut these 3 points out just by having more dexterity on gear. Most of my gear doesn't really have a ton of stats and is still pretty much in a like this needs to be fixed type of territory. For the amulet in particular, like I would love to have like more resistance, maybe even more stats, life. Instead of overwhelming strike here, I think that we probably are going to end up going over to Storm Charged, which gives us 20% crit chance and 40% elemental damage. I think that that's probably the best, but it's kind of hard to tell exactly. I kind of have built a little tool to help me figure out what's the best damage. Overwhelming Strike is pretty darn good though, with critical strike damage bonus and critical hit chance And even stun buildup is pretty nice as well. But I'm sure there's other things here on the tree as well that you could get, like, you know, more cold damage and stuff that might be really cheap. I did a video about how to do the amulet stuff in, you know, my YouTube videos. Go check that out. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the actual setup here. And we just kind of like show you maybe a little bit more gameplay. But if you guys have any questions about Monk, about the build, I think one of the things that I've seen the most is how I deal with mana. So you can see here, like, even without using the bell, we just kind of like knocked over that elite with no problems. And mana can be a big issue for a lot of people. And I have mana leech on my gloves here for physical damage and gain mana per enemy killed. I think that that does help out quite a bit. I just happen to have it on my weapon as well. And so that is, you know, I think maybe important to get on your gear. The other question I get a lot is I'm dying a lot early on in maps. What can I do? And like, one of the best things you can just do is just go. I'm really scared of these freezy guys for some reason. You can just go and actually, oop, that's why. You can go and get yourself resistance capped. I think resistance cap is something that, like, in the campaign, not something you're like not really able to achieve or even really think about too much. Whereas once you make to maps, it starts to become a lot more apparent that this is something that you need to be thinking about and getting these resists up. Like, for a while there, I was on like 36 lightning res, and basically anytime I would see a lightning guy, I'd be really scared, very, very, very scared. And now that we don't have the ability just to drop comments on them very easily, it's something that's a problem. Okay. And I do think that right now as well for charm, what we just talked about, is the Thawing Charm is definitely the best for anti-freeze. Because when you get frozen, there's not really much you can do, and you can sit and freeze for a very, very, very long time, which is quite scary. I do have a flask that does give me instant recovery, which does kind of help a little bit, but that's pretty much it. I'm just going to do a hover over the gear here real quick. Physical damage is the most important on the weapons. Getting yourself life and resistances on rings, especially if you can do like lightning resist base, lightning resist on there, because you can quality it up to make it like double lightning res, which is really nice. My hat, I'm going to want to have a huge evasion rating hat eventually, just to get more evasion into the build, because it's kind of hard to find it on gloves or boot here. So it's pretty much like big, big, big evasion on chest, a little bit less big evasion on hat, probably like double evasion line and life, and then maybe some res if you can get really lucky. On amulet, like, you know, life, more res, maybe some stats on there. Same thing on rings, more just life and, you know, resistances. Gear's not really obviously all that good. Boots, hands down, most important thing is 30% movement speed. Maybe even more, maybe you can get 35%. But then, like, life resistances, also pretty important. And, you know, life resistances on belt. And then, you know, life resistances, maybe attack speed, maybe leech mana, maybe gain mana per enemy killed. All that kind of stuff on gloves, also pretty important. And that's pretty much it. Oh, one last thing I totally almost forgot is jewels. So jewels, you can get some really good stuff in here, like critical damage, attack damage bonus, damage with quarterstaffs, attack speed, yada, 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 all very good. But one of the things I highly recommend is getting a gain 1 rage on melee hit jewel in your, you know, any jewel basically. And so pretty much make it so that it's pretty easy for you to stack up rage as you're running around doing stuff. You can only gain 1 rage, I think, every half second per hit. So every... Let's see here. Only 1 hit every 0.5 seconds can cause you to gain rage. So like the bell ringing a whole bunch won't give you a ton of rage. However, you can gain quite a bit of rage, just like from running around and hitting stuff. We didn't talk about the bell. So the overabundance, by the way, is pretty much like it won't give you the ability to drop 2 bells at the same time, but you can build up the bell while you are having a bell out. So you can pretty much just keep dropping the bell on enemies. Concentrated effect is really just make it do more damage. You can potentially make this magnified if you want to make this do have bigger AoE instead. And then close combat for more damage here. You can do some other stuff like leverage. I think like that could potentially be pretty good. And yeah, just keeping updated on the build. The written guide is always going to be most updated. I'll put a link to that in the description. I've been rambling, but I've also been DonTheCrown. We'll see you guys again soon. Come by the stream. Hope you have a good one. Later, bye.